Inspired by courage and imagination, bold explorers throughout time set course where none had gone before. Today, that same challenge of discovery has brought us to the dawn of a new age, a revolutionary era unprecedented in magnitude and scope. The guiding force of this revolution, electronics, and at its heart, one single startling development, the miniature miracle, the computer chip. Almost certainly, the first calculating was done with the fingers, as we developed a need to keep track of possessions and to trade. Later, to handle numbers much greater than 10, beads were strung together, and the abacus was born. It inspired man to try to create mechanical devices for calculating. In the 1830s, the brilliant English mathematician Charles Babbage built a model for a machine that could compute numerical tables. But he died without his boldest design realized, a machine with two key concepts of modern computers, the ability to store information and follow programs. To feed his machine instructions, Babbage intended to borrow a technique from the famous Jacquard loom, punched cards that determined cloth patterns by telling the rods of the loom whether to fall or not. Information either passed or it stopped, and richly complex patterns emerged. Also, the principle of the player piano, this type of yes, no, on, off encoding would become the basic language of all computers. Used to tabulate the 1890 census, punched cards would become the hallmark of a small New York firm, later known as IBM. Vacuum tubes were the first electronic means of applying the on-off principle. By the mid-1940s, the first vacuum tube-based computers began to appear. Though computational marvels, some filled entire rooms, weighed up to 30 tons, and broke down regularly from their own heat. Then the invention of the transistor. John Bardeen, Walter Brattain, and William Shockley would go on to receive the Nobel Prize for what is considered one of the most important inventions of the 20th century. This 1954 film predicted the wonders that lay ahead. Music at the flick of your wrist with a Dick Tracy radio. And video entertainment wherever you cared to go. Though the transistor was fast and powerful, few could predict that the entire world of electronics would be revolutionized by this tiny giant. Then, defying the imagination of futurists and science fiction writers alike, the silicon chip. Seen here magnified some 500 times, a chip contains thousands of transistors and other electronic components etched into a self-contained circuit usually no larger than a quarter-inch square. Switching, storing, and transforming pulses of electricity, the chip can execute millions of operations a second. Generally, the more elements packed on a chip, the greater its computing speed, and the number of elements has been roughly doubling every year. Almost all chips today are made from silicon, an ingredient of common beach sand and the Earth's most abundant element after oxygen. Processing must be done in an environment more sterile than any operating room. Even minute particles of dust can be disastrous. Purified silicon is sliced into wafers on which hundreds of chips can be made simultaneously. Mass production, lower cost. Lower cost, cheaper computers.